everybody. Thanks for being here. You are the few, the proud, the God's Marines, I guess. Today I want to find out, without any doubt, who the smartest person in the room is. Now you may be thinking, well, the smartest person in the room isn't in the room, they stayed home. But of the people that are here, I want to find out who the smartest person in the room is. And there is a test that will help us, without a doubt, discern who the smartest person in the room is. And it's a test that many of you are familiar with. It's probably a test that you've taken on multiple occasions in your lifetime. Sometimes it is called Simon Says. Now, if you're familiar with Simon Says, we're going to play the church version of it, which is Jesus Says. So when I say Jesus says something to do, you then do it. If I say Jesus says, raise your right hand, you raise your right hand. But if I don't say Jesus says, raise your right hand, if I just say raise your right hand, and I don't say Jesus says, and you do it, or I tell you not to do something and you don't do it because I didn't say Jesus says, then you're out of the game. And the last person who follows all the rules correctly will be the smartest person in the room. Everybody clear on the rules of Jesus says? We're good? Okay, now go ahead and stand up. Come on, everybody stand up. Okay, you're all out. Within the herd right there. Jesus says, go ahead and stand up. So if you're left, if you didn't stand up before, Jesus says, okay, Jesus says, raise your right hand. Now wave your right hand. If you waved your right hand, you're out. Jesus says, wave your right hand. Okay, put your hand down. Put your hand down, you're out. Jesus said, put your hand down. Jesus says, raise your left hand. Jesus says, wave your left hand. Jesus says, clap your hands together. If you moved and stopped waving, you're out. Because I didn't say Jesus said stop waving. So who's left? Who are the smart people in the room? Okay, you win. You can sit down. Go ahead. Have a seat. You can. Right there is the smartest people in the room. I didn't say Jesus said you could sit down. That's good. You guys, you're the winners, smartest people in the room. Jesus says you can sit down now. We all want to be the smartest person in the room, don't we? We want people to think we're smart. We want people to think that we have substance. We want to be valued. We want to be respected. I think there is something inside of all of us that wants to be great, that wants to make a difference. We want to be winners, not losers. We want to make an impact with our life. We want our life to count. We have this desire, this drive, this ambition, and these are good things. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be the best. There's nothing wrong with pursuing excellence. I believe it is embedded in our evolutionary DNA from our ancestors who lived a life where if you weren't the fastest or the smartest or the strongest, you were food for your food. And so you had to be the fastest, the smartest, or the strongest, or you didn't survive. I also believe that we are created with a longing for more, with a desire for something better. It is the evidence of the existence of the eternal. It is the evidence, as C.S. Lewis said, of heaven, that we know there is something more, and we long for it. We're driven to pursue it. And so I think it is totally okay to be a person who is ambitious and seeks excellence and does their best no matter what the cost. These are good things. But these are problematic because everybody can't be the best. In fact, everybody can't be above average. I mean, the math tells us that half of the people are above average and half of the people are below average. Half of us are below average. Even though we want to be above average, not everybody can be, not everybody can win. And so this ambition and this desire, even our longing for better is a frustration. And it would be easy for us to look at that and say, well, God is just a cruel taskmaster. He hangs a carrot out in front of us that we cannot attain. It's a cosmic joke that God is pulling on us to embed in us this desire for more, this desire to be great, this desire to make a difference when God knows you can't. You can't all be the best. And even the people who are the best aren't the best forever. The best is a fleeting thing, that popularity and success and fame and wealth are temporary things, so that even if you do attain it, it's just for a moment. So life is cruel and brutal and seeds in us this frustration, and this is where grace saves us. Because it's in the midst of that ambition and that desire and that drive, that hunger to succeed and make a difference, that we receive grace. Last week, we began a conversation about the hard things of grace. See, we may not realize that grace was something that was given to us as the context for our life as followers of Christ. That grace was a design that was given to the Apostle Paul and to the followers of the early church. They said, I want you who follow Christ to be a people of grace. And it was the Apostle Paul who was called to be the lead architect, to be the initial designer of what that community of grace looked like, what a people of grace looked like. And so last week we began a conversation based on the first sketches of grace. The very first sketches of grace were penciled out by the Apostle Paul in his letter to a church to churches in central Turkey. We have it preserved for us in our Bibles as the book of Galatians. It was, I believe, Paul's first epistle that is preserved for us, and it is where he is beginning to outline and give us the initial formation and foundations of what a people of grace look like. And in the first 5 chapters of the book of Galatians, the letter he wrote to the churches in Galatia, he celebrates and he explains grace. But when we get to the last page, the last chapter, what we have as the 6th chapter of the epistle to the Galatians, he gets to the hard stuff, to the challenges. And last week we talked about how do we confront in grace? How, as a people of grace, do we speak the truth in love? Today, the question is, how do we compete in grace? How do we compete graciously? How do we take that ambition and that desire and that drive and express it and show it with grace? I think the clues are embedded in two sentences that the apostle writes in Galatians chapter 6, verse 4 and 5. He says, pay careful attention, in verse 4, pay careful attention to your own work, not someone else's, not your neighbor's, but your own work. Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you'll get the privilege of finding satisfaction in a job well done. And you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else, because we are each responsible for our own conduct. We are each responsible to carry our own weight. It's here that we learn and get insight in how to compete and seek to be the best gracefully. But before we talk about that anymore, would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, and that you would use your words spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to challenge us to be the best we can be, and to give ourselves the grace to do it well. Pray that for myself and for my family and for all of us here. For I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. I think it's important that we take a minute to kind of review the core concept of grace. We have to remember, because we often overlook this or we forget, that grace only works in failure. Grace only has value in insufficiency. Perfect people don't need grace. Only imperfect people need grace. Only people who make mistakes, who are broken, who are damaged, these are the people who need grace. And since, I believe, none of us is perfect, that qualifies all of us to be recipients of grace. So that grace makes up the difference. That grace makes up the space between our capacity and our dreams and our desires and our ambitions. It's in that place that grace takes hold. This is where grace is manifested in our weakness, in our inadequacy. And I believe that to be truly successful, you have to come to terms with your own limitations. You have to understand what you can and can't do, what you are and are not responsible for. And the things that you can do, you do them to the best of your ability. I think this is exactly what the Apostle Paul is saying in Galatians chapter 6, verse 4. He says, I want you to examine carefully. I want you to pay close attention to your own work. He uses 4 pronouns in this one phrase. He basically says, I want you who are working to pay your own attention to your own work. He's basically saying, don't look around and look at other people. Don't compare yourself. Don't measure yourself by others. Pay careful attention to what you are doing. And the word for pay attention to or examine carefully is the word that was used for examining the purity of gold. It was a word that described the refining process, that when you wanted to carefully examine gold, you put it in a fire and you burned off all of the impurities. And in that examination, you understood what was pure and what was impure. And I think this is the path to true success. To succeeding in grace, we have to give ourselves the grace and know what we're good at and what we're not, what we're capable of and what we're not, what we're responsible for and what we're not. You have to burn off those things that are not your responsibility, not within your capacity, but you have to do the things you can do with great purity and intensity, ambition and drive. See, the principle is really simple. You want to know what it means to succeed gracefully? It means that you give yourself the grace you need. It's hard for some of us to do. It's hard for us to grant ourselves grace. I know for me, there are people that are willing to grant me grace before I will accept grace from myself for myself. Is there anybody else that struggles with that? I really do. I really struggle to give myself the grace because I want to be better. I want to be the best. But true success is measured by granting yourself the same grace that God grants you. Now, there's obstacles to that. There's hindrances to that. I want to look at these 2 verses and share with you 3 things. 3 obstacles, 3 pitfalls, 3 things that prevent us from experiencing graceful success. And the first one is when we're overtaken with a sense of futility. My grandfather was a dairy farmer. There's a picture of me and my grandfather. That's me on the left, in case you didn't recognize it. Dapper. How good looking was I? I don't know, I was probably 2 or 3 years old. That's my grandfather there on the left. That's me on the right. He was left-handed. I was left-handed. I was his first grandson. I was his only grandson at the time. And he was my favorite grandpa. And he was a dairy farmer. And so I watched my grandfather as I grew up. I watched my grandfather get up every morning before dawn and milk cows. Well, I didn't always get up with my grandfather, but my grandfather always got up. Because you know how many days a year you have to get up to milk the cows? 365. Cows don't take a vacation. They don't know for Christmas or Easter or Memorial Day or the 4th of July. They have no sense of holidays. And when I was young, it was hand milking 20 or 30 cows every morning and every evening. He would come to the breakfast table at 7 in the morning and he had already worked for over 2 hours. And then he would go from breakfast and he would work in the fields and he would work in the barn and he would do the repair work on the tractors and the equipment and work planting and sowing. And every day there were things that needed to be done that only he could do, and he did them every day after day, season after season, year after year, until the day he died. Now, you could look at my grandfather's life and you could say, what a waste. What a waste. What a colossal, awful way to spend your life, day after day, doing the same thing just to survive, just so you can live long enough to die. How is that success? You know what I learned from my grandfather? That hard work is its own reward. He never won Farmer of the Year. As far as I know, nobody drove by the farm and applauded and say, "Yay, Ralph! Way to go, Ralph! Way to be a great dairy farmer." His family loved on him, and we appreciated what my grandfather did. But he wasn't famous. He never got rich. He just did his job to the best of his ability every single day, and that was enough. You see, when we give ourselves grace, we recognize that is enough. To give your best, to do your best to what is in front of you right now. Do your best. And hard work is its own reward, that there is honor in a job well done. What Paul says in Galatians chapter 6, he says, if you pay attention, if you pay careful attention to your own work, then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done. The word for satisfaction is kautsima. It's a word for pride. It means then you will get to be proud of what you do. Then you will get to boast in what you do. Even if no one ever sees it, even if no one ever acknowledges it, even if no one ever says thank you, you know that you did your best, and you can have satisfaction in that. My brother-in-law, David, is a master electrician. He started his own company right after high school, and he's been an electrician ever since. And there have been many times when I've watched him on the job, and I believe he's meticulous at what he does. He's great at what he does. You can always tell a house that my brother-in-law has wired because the wires are always parallel and at right angles. They're not just run willy-nilly anywhere. Everything is tacked down and tight and neat. If you see a panel that my brother-in-law has put in, all the wires are perfectly spaced and perfectly placed, tacked in, and it's then covered over with wallboard, and nobody ever sees it. He's the kind of guy who, when he's putting in wall switch plates, he makes sure that the screws are all vertical. Now you can say that that's OCD. That's just his upset. No, that's his desire to do his job well. That's taking pride, kautsima, satisfaction in his own work. I promise you, my grandfather, every night he laid his head on a pillow, was proud of what he had done, that he had done his best every day. Give yourself the grace to not give in to the sense of futility or the sense of frustration that this monotonous repetition of life gives you, whether you're a Walmart greeter or a short order cook at Denny's, or whether you're saving lives in the ER or molding the minds of young children in a classroom. No matter how significant or insignificant you feel your life is, give it your best. Because hard work is its own reward. Don't give in to the frustration and the futility of the absence of acknowledgement or approval or applause. Do your best, and that's enough. The second pitfall that I struggle with, and I think it's embedded here in Paul's writing, is the struggle of comparison and envy. Am I the only person that struggles with that? I do. I'm a competitive person by nature. I measure myself by how others do what I do, or how others are doing what I'm doing. I can't help it, whether I'm skiing or playing a pickup game of basketball or preaching. I have this genetic predisposition to want to be the best. And how do you do that? And trust me, having this ambition and this desire and this drive and this desire to be the best in my line of work is dangerous. Because how do you know? Oh, you're the best preacher in the world. Well, I tell you how preachers measure how good they are. They measure how many people showed up. So today, I am the worst in the history of Riverbend. And these preachers get into these pissing contests about how big their churches are. I remember having a conversation with a guy right after I came to Riverbend from the East Coast. And the first question he asked me, how big is your church? I said, I don't know, there's a lot of people there. He goes, over 1,000? Yeah, I guess. He goes, you must have an amazing handbell choir. Really? That's the measure of success that I'm being measured by? Boy, I really am not good at my job, because our handbell choir is kind of like hit or miss. But he thought, man, if you're a successful pastor, your church has a handbell choir. But you know, it's not just my profession that has that problem. Who's the best doctor in the world? Who's the best teacher? Who's the best truck driver? Who's the best clerk at Walmart or at H-E-B? Who's the best mom? Who's the best dad? Who's the best? How do we measure that? Well, all we wind up doing is we wind up measuring it against someone else. Paul says that if you pay careful attention, evaluate your own work honestly, then you don't need to compare yourself with anybody else. If what you did, you know, is your best, that's enough. Now, I know that's lame. That's what losers say. I gave it my best effort. But here's how I've kind of come to terms with that. With that competitive drive and that ambition and that metric, that the only way I know if I'm doing well is I compare myself to someone else. I see what I do as an offering. And so my best effort is my best offering. There's a picture here. A picture that my oldest daughter drew when she was 6 or 7 years old. She was at a school, and her school was having a field day at the end of the school year. And a few weeks before the field day, they told all the elementary school students that they should draw a picture, and it would be a contest. And in the contest, whoever drew the best picture for field day, that picture would be transferred to all the t-shirts that all of the students and all of the teachers would wear at the upcoming field day. Now, my daughter, my oldest daughter, Kaya, has a competitive gene. She is a ferocious young woman. I don't know where she gets it from, her mother probably, but she at 5 or 6 years old, she wanted to win. She wanted to win. I remember she came home with this picture. She had turned it in, and they had made their evaluations and gave her picture back, and she came and she presented it to me. She said, Dad, this is going to be on a t-shirt. I'm going to win the contest, and I want you to have this. And a day or two later, it was announced that she didn't win. Her picture wasn't going to be on the t-shirts. You know what happened to that picture? It got ugly. She looked at it and said, oh, look, I spelled this wrong, or that letter's backwards, or I don't even look like that. It's just so bad, Dad. Isn't that a terrible painting? Isn't that a terrible drawing? And that's when I went out and I bought this ribbon and I put it in a frame. I went to Hobby Lobby and had it all matted, and it hangs in my office. It reminds me that as her father, her best effort is always her best offering. Because that's the best thing she could have done for me, was her best. If I know how to do that, do you think God is any less satisfied When we say, this is my best, this is the best that I can do, I offer it to you. I don't offer it for approval among the masses. I don't offer it to my friends or neighbors for their affirmation. I offer it to you. I'm giving you my best, and God is always pleased with our best. Our best effort is always our best offering. And then you don't need to compare yourself to anyone else. Because your best effort is your best offering. Don't give in to the idea of the futility of your life. Remember that hard work is its own reward. Don't get overwhelmed by the comparisons and the competitions that our culture encourages us to have. Remember that your best effort is your best offering. Do everything you do as unto God. I'm giving you my best. Do with it what you will. There's a third obstacle that I struggle with, and that's the obstacle of blame. The obstacle of blame. I'm blaming God, I'm blaming other people, I'm blaming myself, and I make excuses. And excuses get a bad rap because we attach excuses to parts of the human anatomy and basically say everybody has them. They are a cop-out, they are a crutch. But we all make excuses. We all have to process excuses. I was reading a Forbes magazine article where they listed the best excuses that employers ever received from employees as to why they were late for work. And these were the top 5. These are actual, according to the article, these are actual things people actually said as the excuse for why they were late for work. A woman employee said she was late for work because she accidentally got on a plane. And she didn't even work for an airline. How do you accidentally get on a plane? Another guy said he got stuck in the blood pressure machine at the grocery store and couldn't get out. I was late for work because I was stuck in the blood pressure machine at the grocery store. This is possible. Another guy, and I love this one, said he was late for work because his false teeth flew out of the window while he was driving down the highway. Okay, you be late on you go back and get those choppers. Here's another one. Here's a guy who said, I was late for work because I forgot I got the job. Your first day is your last day. And then my favorite, this is the most honest reason that anyone ever gave for being late for work. A woman said she woke up in a good mood and didn't want to ruin it by coming to work. Okay, I'll buy that. Grace is not an excuse. Grace is not a crutch. Grace is not settling for good enough. Grace is not an empowering mediocrity. In fact, grace is accepting responsibility for the hand you've been given, for the challenges that you face, for the burdens that you carry. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 5, the Apostle Paul says this. He says, for each of us is responsible for our own conduct. I don't like the word conduct, the way the New Living translates it. The word means burden. Each of us is responsible, and it literally means to carry our own weight, to carry our own burdens. And I know, for some of you, those burdens are great. They're overwhelming. And you don't know how you're going to make it through the next day. That is your best. You make the most of what you've been given, and that's the most you can do. Think of it. What are the most inspirational stories that we hear? They're not just stories of people who succeed. They're stories of people who succeed in spite of what was against them. The great inspirational stories of success are stories of people who were counted out, who overcame the odds, who showed a resiliency and a persistence in spite of their circumstances. They didn't settle for blame. Grace is not an excuse. Grace is a reminder that you can make the most of what you've been given, and that's good enough. You don't have to blame others. You don't have to blame yourself. You don't have to blame God. Grace sets you free from that. Grace is this gift that only the imperfect need. It's only valuable to those who have failed or fallen short. Give yourself grace. In order to succeed, to be truly successful, give yourself grace and don't get hung up. Don't get hung up on the futility of life. Believe me, hard work is its own reward. There is honor in a job well done. And don't get caught up in competition and comparison. It's okay to evaluate yourself by another person, but your best offering is your best effort. And don't get stuck in this trap of blame, blaming God, blaming others, blaming yourself, blaming your past, blaming your circumstances. Accept the responsibility and make the most of what you've been given, because that's success. We're people who need grace because we are imperfect, we are flawed people, and in that, it forms a safety valve, a pressure release, so that we don't have to be perfect, we just do our best. Now you may think that grace is a consolation prize, that grace is God's participation trophy, and I'm not a fan of participation trophies. I think that's a bunch of boo-ha. Participation, but yeah, you showed up. You tried really hard. You're terrible at that, but you really look like it was a lot of work. Now, that's not to say that we don't learn from failure. I like the phrase that says there's two types of people. There's winners and learners. I think it's true that it's not how whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. These things are true. But grace is not a consolation prize. Grace is not a participation trophy. Grace is a gift that says, be your best and I'll make up for the rest. Trust me to manage what you cannot, to bridge the gap that you can't get across. This is my grace that I'm giving to you. I think ambition is good. Drive and desire, the pursuit of excellence, these are good things. I think we are fashioned for them. And what I think happens is I think grace sanctifies our ambition. Grace redeems our desire. And it says, okay, you give me your best and I'll do the rest. And you know the interesting thing about grace is that we can grant it to ourselves. This is what Paul is talking about in Galatians chapter 6. He said, pay careful attention to your own work, because then you can get satisfaction from a job well done. And you won't need to compare yourself to all these other people, because each of us carried our own weight. Each of us was responsible for our own conduct. This is how grace applies in the context of competition. It sanctifies our ambition, it redeems our desires, and it makes up for the difference. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Take Simon's word. Simon says the grace is enough. Or better yet, Jesus says, show yourself the grace that I have shown you. Jesus says, believe this.